Hello everyone, this is the audio recording of reading the book called The General's Son: Journey of an Israeli in Palestine by Miko Peled. So let's begin. The Sanity of Friendship by Alice Walker, given the statement at 2012. There are few books on the Israel and Palestine issue that seem as hopeful to me as this one. First of all, we find ourselves in the hands of a formerly Zionist Israeli who honors his people, loves his homeland, respects and cherishes his parents, other family members and friends, and is, to boot, the son of a famous general whose activities during Israel's war against the Palestinian people helped cause much of their dislocation and suffering. Added to this, long after Miko Peled, the writer, has left the special forces of the Israeli army and moved to Southern California to teach karate. A beloved niece, his sister's daughter, Samadar, a young citizen of Jerusalem, is killed by Palestinians in a suicide bombing. Right away we think, goodness, how is he ever going to get anywhere sane with this history? He does. I don't remember when I heard Miko Peled talk about the Israeli/Palestinian conflict, but I was moved by a story he was telling, probably on YouTube, about his mother. I am sensitive to mothers who never, it seems to me, get enough credit for their impact on society and the world, and so I was eager to hear what this Israeli peace activist, karate master and writer had to say about his. He was telling the story of the Nakba from his mother's point of view. Nakba is Arabic for the catastrophe that happened to Palestinians when the Israeli army in lethal force invaded their communities in 1947 to 48 and drove them in their hundreds of thousands of their homes out of their homes, frequently looting and or blowing up homes, but if the houses were beautiful and or well situated, taking them for themselves. As the invaders moved in, the coffee, Peled was informed, was sometime still on the table, still hot, as the inhabitants were forced to flee. His mother, Zika, was offered one of these confiscated houses. She refused it. It was unbearable to her that she might be sitting sipping coffee in the home of another woman who was now with her frightened or wounded family, sitting hungry and miserable in a refugee camp. Miko Peled's father, General Mamamati Peled, also rises to full and compassionate dignity in his son's narrative, though somewhat later, and one feels with considerably more of a struggle than his wife. He was, after all, a staunch Zionist and a general in the Israeli army, richly praised for his acumen and courage in battle, both in Israel's War of Independence in 1947 to 48, quote unquote, the Palestinians' catastrophe, and in the 1967 war, in which Israel preemptively attacked its neighbor, Egypt, and proceeded illegally to take huge parts of what was until then Palestine. Although the generals knew that the Egyptian army was too weak at the time to pose a military threat to Israel, Khalid and his fellow officers carried out their plan to attack and destroy Egypt as a military power. However, even before this event, Khalid had begun experiencing a change of outlook. The aftermath of a massacre of Palestinian civilians by Israeli soldiers made a deep impression on him and caused him to believe that an army of occupation kept in place indefinitely would ultimately lead to the most hideous violence and demoralization not only of the Palestinian oppressed but of the Israeli oppressors as well. After many decades of service to his country, General Khalid left the army to become a professor of Arabic literature at Tel Aviv and Haifa universities. He learned Arabic and spoke it fluently. He became, as well, a peace activist. He worked with and made friends among Palestinian peace activists and leaders, as his son Miko Khalid would do decades later. One such friend was the controversial head of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat. What is the prevailing feeling, having read this moving book, given how determined our testosterone-driven world seems to be to make continuous, endless war and perhaps to blow all of us up in one? Possibly soon. I feel immense relief and gratitude. Someone's must take responsibility for being the grown-ups of our human universe. There must be people in all walks of life who decide enough is enough. There are children here that even if in your derangement and pain or your greed and that even if in your derangement and pain or your greed and covetousness you do me grievous harm, even to the taking of the life of my child, I still choose to see you and your people as human, though perhaps distorted, warped, and tortured almost beyond human recognition. I refuse to turn away from the effort to talk to you, frightened though I might be, whenever possible. I will not refuse to make friends. Mimiko Pellet, at first terrified of reaching out to Palestinians because of the false reports he was, since childhood, given to them, realizes the insanity of remaining enemies of a people he has had no opportunity to truly know. What he discovers energizes and encourages him. He begins to understand the danger inherent in living in ignorance of the so called other and begins to realize he would be a far different, a far less open and loving person had he not, despite his fears, freed himself in this way. His freedom to be at ease with the very people he was taught to hate is, of course, a bonus for his own children, for the next generation of Israelis and Palestinians. The extreme volatility of the Middle East, with Israel's lengthy list of human rights abuses and contempt for international opinion and the law at the center of everybody's fear, is a threat to us all. It is senseless to believe anyone on the planet can afford to ignore or dismiss it. Miko Peled is a credit to both his parents as he tries to raise funds for and then to ship 1,280 wheelchairs to those maimed and made invalids in Palestine and Israel. I see his mother's compassion for others who have lost what he still has in his tireless teaching of martial arts to children, especially those in Palestine. I see his father, the general, spreading the faith among the troops that being outnumbered and outarmed is no reason not to win. A shared homeland, the dream of growing numbers of Israelis and Palestinians in which each person feels free to be herself or himself is or might be the prize of friendship. In fact, it is only by choosing friendship over enmity that winning makes any sense in a world as on the brink as the one we are living in, where being enemies and attempting to disappear each other has played out, living destruction, ugliness, cynicism, and fear, not to mention a ruined planet, disease, and death. We will share the earth and care for it together as friends of each other and to her, or we will lose it. I look to the examples of enemies becoming friends to everywhere, becoming friends everywhere in this book to help us continue to carefully choose our way. The following poem was inspired by watching one video home demolitions, house grabbing by Israeli settlers in Palestine. It was a shock to witness the jubilation of the conquerors while installing the Israeli flag on the roof of a house whose just evicted inhabitants huddled in the street below. I dedicate it to smother the Israeli and to the two unknown Palestinian suicide bombers who died with her. Perhaps also teenagers, as she was. I wish I wish with all my heart that they might have been friends, playing together rather than dying together, to the grief of all of us who honor the young. Hope. Hope 2011 by Alice Walker. Hope never. Hope 2011 by Alice Walker. Hope never to covet the neighbor's house with the fragment garden from which family has been driven by your soldiers, mother, father, grandparents, the toddler, and the dog, now homeless, huddled, holding on to each other, stunned and friendless beneath you in the street, sitting on cobblestones as if one as if on the sofas inside that you have decided to clean, recover, and keep. Hope never to say yes to their misery. Hope never to gaze down into their faces from what used to be their rooftops. Hope never to believe this robbery will make you a better citizen of your new country as you unfurl and wave its recent flag that has been given to assure you of this impossibility, and of the note of Alice Walker, which was given by 2012